Virginia Satir, The Third Birth. This biography was written by Russell Haber. I'm Della Marshall, a colleague working at the Counseling and Human Development Center of the University of South Carolina. As Virginia Satir wrote in her unfinished book, The Third Birth, my approach is based on the premise that all we manifest at any point in time represents what we have learned, consciously, implicitly, cellularly. Our behavior reflects what we have learned. Learning is the basis of behavior. To change behavior, we need to have new learning. Virginia's approach to learning reviewed rules, resources, and coping patterns developed in the family of origin. She called this family reconstruction. This video will begin by looking at her own family of origin, the vessel that began Virginia's evolution into one of the most important psychotherapists, humanitarians, and teachers of our time. Her desire to promote growth included everyone. She wanted the entire planet to heal, as well as the person in front of her. She went from being a self-described detective of parents to a leader who nurtured and facilitated the capacity to become more fully human. Virginia described the third birth as that time when you feel yourself to be your own decision maker and take charge of your own life. She added that this is done by developing one's uniqueness and becoming a responsible and responsive human, among other human beings on this planet. As family therapists, we realize how difficult it is to be our own decision makers in the face of a complex relational learning from our family of origin. As Virginia often said, we all begin as very little, vulnerable miracles of life. Our parents provide the necessary ingredients to activate life. We are each unique. Of the more than 6 billion people in the world, no one has the same fingerprint, eye configuration, or tone of voice. There are so many subtle and substantial differences between all of us. On the other hand, there are infinite number of similarities. Many of us have similar organs, number of bones, similar strands of DNA, and the capacity to use our senses and express ourselves. She often said, we grow by our differences and connect through our similarities. Virginia was born in a farm community in rural Wisconsin on June 26, 1916. All of her grandparents were born in Germany between 1870 and 1875. Her maternal grandmother, when 18 months old, lost all of her family except a 12-year-old half-brother to a cholera epidemic. Virginia's life story was one of orphanage, abandonment, longing, and loss. Born into a family of means, she lived a Cinderella script in that she suffered loss and disadvantage but felt special. Her foster parents persuaded her to marry, reportedly to settle a debt. Her paternal grandmother was impregnated by a man of a lower social class, forced to marry, and disowned by her parents. Both marriages of her grandparents suffered through loss, estrangement, and a feeling of women marrying beneath themselves. This produced difficult marriages full of resentment. Virginia's mother, Minnie Wilkie, the second daughter of 7 children, also married a man against her mother's wishes. His name was Reinhold Pagenkopf, an uneducated, unmotivated, poor farmer who was the youngest of 13 children. Virginia herself was the eldest of 5 children, born just 9.5 months after their marriage. For several stressful years, they lived with Reinhold's parents. His father suffered from psychosis to the point he was eventually hospitalized. Virginia's earliest memories were of her grandfather chasing her grandmother with a knife as her mother nursed her twin brothers. Virginia said she ceased being a child after the twins were born, merely 18 months after her, because they were born prematurely and had some medical problems. Her father abused alcohol. Understandably, her mother felt overwhelmed and resentful. Virginia once said of her life script during a workshop, "All I remember is being pushed away, and so, very early, there was the feeling that my mother hated me and that my father was weak and ineffectual, and I was supposed to be Queen Mary, to carry the honor of the family somehow." Virginia had her share of physical maladies. She suffered profound hearing loss between ages 4 and 6, so she quickly developed the ability to read lips. She also developed her astute abilities to notice and decipher nonverbal communication. More dramatically, Virginia almost died of appendicitis when she was 5.5 because her mother refused to get her treatment due to beliefs in Christian Science. Her father defied her mother and forcibly took her to the hospital just in the nick of time. It took several months in the hospital for Virginia to recover from the ordeal. Her father angrily burned all of the mother's religious books, and her mother retorted by cutting off her own beautiful red hair. Virginia's place in the marital triad was quite difficult. She felt that she was the glue that held them together. However, she made a conscious decision following her appendicitis that she would focus her life on working hard rather than protecting them. She had the strength and courage to form her destiny. However, the price was to be estranged from her family. This estrangement continued through much of her adult life, including a 20-year period where she had very little contact with any members of her family of origin. Virginia was always a very bright child. She was reading by age 3. She attended a one-room schoolhouse and enjoyed learning with children of different ages. By the time she was 9, it was reported that she read all 900 books in her school library. Virginia managed to progress academically, even though her mother was sometimes overwhelmed, including several months of significant depression and despite her father's alcoholism. All of these factors contributed to an unhappy marriage. Yet her mother stressed the value of education and moved the family to Milwaukee in order to provide access to a good high school. Since Virginia went to high school during the Great Depression, she had the substantial responsibilities of working extra jobs to earn money as well as helping her mother take care of her 4 younger siblings. In spite of all this, she rapidly progressed through high school and finished before her 16th birthday in 1932. She credited one teacher in particular, Estelle Stone, for teaching her to use all experiences as opportunities to learn. Virginia courageously registered for college with her high school diploma and just $3 in her pocket. She entered Milwaukee State Teachers College because, at the time, professional women in the United States most frequently worked as teachers, nurses, or social workers. Besides her heavy work schedule and home responsibilities, she graduated 3rd in her class in 1936 before she turned 20. She began teaching after college and made a practice of going home with a student each day after school. In doing this, she became enthralled with what she learned about her students' families. She realized that by knowing her students' families, she could help improve their progress in school. This innovative school practice may have set the stage for her work with families in 1951. Virginia later decided to go into social work in order to better help abused and neglected children. But in 1941, she left school to marry Gordon Rogers. He was a soldier she had known only a month and married just before he went overseas to fight in World War II. She wanted to have a family, but in 1943 she had an ectopic pregnancy which required emergency surgery and a complete hysterectomy. Suddenly finding herself unable to have children, she coped with her sadness by immersing herself into her job and schoolwork. Just as she had learned to do in childhood, she transformed disappointment and loss into constructing new opportunities. She went on to earn a master's degree from the University of Chicago in 1948. When she moved to Texas to follow her husband's military career, she brought along 2 sisters at the Chicago Home for Girls who she had counseled. However, this awkward family unit was short-lived. Virginia immersed herself in her work, and resentment and bitterness filled the marriage. She separated in 1949, divorced in 1950, and returned to Chicago. Virginia married Norman Satir in 1951, a union that lasted only 6 years. It was yet another marriage that she got into precipitously, and it also suffered from her heavy workload. It is such a paradox that an expert in communication and family relationships would allow her mission of teaching and helping others to interfere with the success of her own relationships. She began counseling families in 1951 when a mother threatened to sue Virginia for her daughter's alienation of affection. Virginia interpreted this as the mother's desire for help and a need to address other problems in the family. Her success in this case prompted her immersion into family work. Later, in January 1955, she taught a family dynamics course at Chicago State Hospital. Virginia became one of the pioneers in family therapy and longed to communicate with other voices in this emerging field. She moved to California in 1958. Virginia joined the Mental Research Institute in 1959, where she became the director of training. She preferred clinical work and training to research, but she learned a great deal about communication. Her work at Mental Research Institute culminated in the publication of Conjoint Family Therapy in 1964. This became one of the classic texts in the field of family therapy. She moved to Iselin in Big Sur, California in 1965, where she worked in the role of Director of Training once again. Iselin was the center of the Human Potential Movement. Fritz Perls also resided at Iselin, and it became the marquee for teaching about the expansion of human consciousness. Virginia's therapy shifted from being cognitive and communication-oriented to one that emphasized affect, emotional expression, body awareness, intuition, and spirituality. Her emergence into the Human Potential Movement and bringing her work to the masses caused her peers to be suspicious of her work. She published People Making in 1972 in order to teach families how to use systemic concepts. She also published several other shorter books on self-esteem, making contact, and her adaptation of Roberto Aslagoglia's work on subpersonalities. Her schedule included about 300 days on the road year after year. She traveled tirelessly around the globe in order to inspire personal and relational growth. She was very excited about her work in Eastern Europe and the new opportunity to experience freedom. Her trip to the Soviet Union was in April 1988, the year she died. However, she was not ready to die. She had many projects and plans in the works. In the 80s, she returned to the professional arena in order to make her work better understood. She once again connected with the family therapy community. She co-authored Satir, Step by Step, and co-edited Use of Self with Michelle Baldwin, and co-authored the Satir model with Bandman, Gamora, and Gerber. Satir died as she lived, deeply connected to a professional community while guiding their growth. Even from her deathbed, she asked her close associates to pick an object in her house that had meaning for them and to share that meaning in the group. A couple of days before she died, she dictated a message to be sent to those who were not able to be with her at her death. To all my friends, colleagues, and family, I send you love. Please support me in my passage to a new life. I have no other way to thank you than this. You have all played a significant part in my development of loving. As a result, my life has been rich and full, so I leave feeling very grateful. Virginia Satir died more than 12 years ago, but her seeds continue to thrive. Her extensive work in many Native American tribal councils and families in continents throughout the world go on. Also, several organizations, I Learn, Avanta, and Satir Family Camp continue her work. For instance, Satir Family Camp provides a place where 125 people from just months to 88 years old spend a week each year in a commitment to growth and community. All of these well-organized systems live according to Satir's mantra: peace within, peace between, peace among. Perhaps we can hypothesize that Satir worked so hard for world peace because it was a missing link in her family and marriages. How fortunate for the world that she used this longing as an opportunity. She lived as she preached. The problem is not the problem. Coping is the problem. She coped by working to transform the planet. Not a small task, but Virginia was not a small person. We can extend her dream by living congruently in harmony. Thus we can share her dream of peace within, peace between each other, and peace among all of the inhabitants of the world. The choice of congruence and peace is what she meant by the third birth. The following 2 edited clinical sessions will show her approach to becoming more fully human in clinical practice.